Well, hi there. I'm Todd Christie, Speaker of the House, Michigan Dental Association, and joined here by former President of the Michigan Dental Association, Deb Peters. And she's been nice enough to come in and help me out and help us out and learn more about our association and some of the ongoing things with our Board of Trustees. From our House survey that you all filled out, well, a good percentage of you filled out, we got some feedback, and I want to address those areas. So through getting information and working and talking to Deb, you can learn more about why decisions are made and how things happen within our board. So when those questions come up, you'll know the answers. So, Deb, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure, Todd.
It is always fun to have a parliamentary nerd with me in a meeting like this so we can get these questions answered. But let's start off first. One of the major topics that we got with questions was talking about executive session. Now, this is something new. Well, it's not new, but executive session in the old days when I was on the board all those years back, it could happen at any time during a meeting. And it's changed a little bit in that manner. So, Deb, why don't you tell us, what is executive session?
So executive session is when your group, or in this situation, the board, meets in a private or closed session so that their discussions are considered confidential.
Okay, cool. It's official now. I have note cards, folks. So what kind of topics are typically discussed within our current board? I know we've had modifications over my last 3 years here with the board, but what are we normally talking about in these areas with these executive sessions?
Sure. So last year the board did adopt policy based on executive sessions. So the topics that they would cover in executive session would be anytime they're discussing strategy. That could be something that we definitely don't want to get public. Maybe legislative strategy. It may be something that we're working towards. So if the information were to be out there, could not be could get our information out in a way that we don't want to until we're ready. Mm-hmm. And the last is when we're discussing a person. We don't discuss people or people's names, such as voting on awards, unless it's confidential.
Right, and that was the one part I remember from in the past as well. A lot of it was voting, when awards were for nominations and reviewing nominees in that discussion. That was always a big part too, because you don't want that conversation out there, because it's how the board works through its information that it's going through. So right now, and I know this is something that when you were on, I believe as president-elect, we looked at finding a particular time, because this is typically first thing on our Friday morning agenda.
Yes.
We have that, and it's nice because they look and see how much information is there, starting off at 8 o'clock. What a great way to start your day in executive session, I will tell you. You have a good breakfast and you're sitting there hearing all these topics. But I know we also have time limits too.
We do. I mean, as much as possible, the chair does try to keep to the time limits of the executive session. So as you mentioned, the agenda is timed. They look at what's going on. It's nice that it's first thing in the morning. We do like members to come. Our board meetings are open. But when we run up to a time limit, the chair's been known to call for the stop of the executive session. Right. And we may have to revisit it later in the meeting, but it allows us to stay on time, allows us to keep those early parts with our board members in, and then our guests can arrive.
Right, and typically I know that in the last, I'll say 5-6 meetings we've had at 8 o'clock start with the executive session. Usually 9:30 is a starting point for the open board session that we have with it. And then even, I know for our agenda here for our meeting tomorrow, it says that afterwards in an executive session, if needed, for where the board will dismiss everyone else from the room and go to executive session then. It's a great way to manage it, to keep it so when folks are coming in from out of town, we're not wasting their time that we have to clear the room to have a discussion. That's a real nice way to do it, because that's what we had to do in the old way, which was a real challenge in through there too with it. All right, here's the big question now. What happens if information that we discuss in executive session gets out? What can that possibly create havoc for?
That's an interesting question. Granted, you never want your information to get out. That's why you have it in an executive session. So certainly if private or confidential information gets out, there's board policy on how to handle that if it's an individual board member. But more importantly, I guess the topic would be looked at, what has gotten out, and made sure that there's appropriate background so that everyone would understand the full discussion. I can see where something were to get out, without more information, that would cause more questions.
And so it's not something we've had to deal with here recently, but I know that's one of the questions. I always refer to the executive session, for those that remember now, I do not remember it live when it came on, was from Get Smart, the cone of silence. Everything comes down and that's all you say. And you know, what it's not what stays in Vegas. If it stays in the boardroom, you know, what happens in the boardroom stays in the boardroom for executive session. You know, we look at it that way, and it's something that they read through an executive session. Here's the policy, here's where we're at. It's important to know that, but I know our board is well versed in our conversations and why we keep them in that manner, which is good. Now, one thing, are there times that the results from voting in executive session are revealed or let known afterwards? I think we do have some
Yeah,
like that.
sure. Well, particularly after awards, after you have your conversations confidentially, after the voting occurs, the announcement is made. And it becomes a public announcement after the awardees are notified. Certainly there are times where in executive session you may be working on legislative strategy. Now you're moving forward.
Right.
You're going to, of course, let your membership know we're moving forward with this legislation.
And it was one part too, and I remember reading this in a couple places over the past couple years here from the House survey and talking to members as well. And they said, well, that's all the good stuff. You know, we come to the other meeting and all the good stuff happens in executive session. Now, it's really difficult with stuff that we're looking forward, like you said, when we reveal or we're talking about award nominations, we're talking about legislative strategies, other stuff that needs to remain in that private manner and that executive session. You know, we get that stuff goes out. It's just not good at that time, like I said, or how we review if there's a problem or it gets released too soon. But I don't think it's always just the good stuff. I think a lot of really great stuff happens during our full board meeting.
Yes, absolutely.
Well.
Absolutely. Most of our stuff happens in open session. Mind that a board member may want to have a question, and rather than thinking through and trying to be really selective with your words when you're asking the attorney or you're asking a staff member, we can ask things openly and fully flesh it out. I think that moves the board business forward a little quicker too.
Right, and as always with everything we talk about, communication is always the key.
Absolutely.
And I think executive session is a strong way that allows any board to go through and have these discussions. And I think for this as well, executive session in a component board is important for when they have to deal with certain issues. You think about with the executive session how it relates with our own peer review system. And how those, so we do have it throughout the system. Executive session at the board level, though, is something that has come up, and I'm glad we could take some time to do that today, and appreciate you coming in, Deb. Thank you so much. And look for more topics as well for what we're going to talk about regarding our Board of Trustees. Thanks a lot.